Hello, hello. This is the my artifact um episode number 4171. I'm doing this thing video artifact episode for almost for a very long period of time. Not very long period of time. It's been like basically it's this thing almost like a week. I haven't really recorded video artifact. The reason was that he rained, yeah, but right now the weather is kind of like a little bit of pleasant. The sky is a bit cloudy, by the way, but I'm not really sure that rain will gonna happen sooner or something like that. Probably it kind of like gives us bit buffer time to kind of like a record artifact, so that's why I'm kind of like a recording video artifact. Okay. Hello, this is my artifact episode number 4171. Today's date is July 24, 2026. It's been almost like a 6:58 a.m. Alright, let's just jump into the question. Yeah. By the way, like a I was actually thinking that just trim it down like I was kind of doing it that I was kind of putting a lot of beard and things and that, but because of these kind of white sparkles and things, it kind of make me feel like old and things and that, so I kind of try to decided that let's just trim it down. Okay. But kind of a trim down me is not looking that much well, probably. So having little bit of beard will be really good, but this white thing, I don't like it. I feel like old and stuff like that. Okay, so let's just jump to the question. Alright, yeah. So question is, wait, should children use it or not? Okay, what exactly is this question? I wanted to build a AI that could predict the future. Yeah, I wanted to build AI that could predict the future. Now, basically, it's this thing that before I wanted to build such a AI that could predict the future, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences. So I went to ChatGPT. I said that I wanted to build AI that could predict the future. Suggest me hundreds of questions. ChatGPT kind of suggests me hundreds of questions. This is one of those questions. By the way, question actually in the mobile phone, but while recording, I cannot do anything at all. So that's why I wrote the question in here. So see the question. Alright, so question is, should children use it or not? Okay. So okay, should children use it or not? That's a really good question. Adam is a AI that could predict the future, and basically is this thing that long story short, no children will not gonna allow to use my platform. Okay. The basic principle is that why they did not, they will not gonna use your platform. Well, it's not because of that I'm kind of not letting them use. It's because of that they will not gonna use. Okay. Now why is that they are not gonna use? Take an example like a children means what. Let's understand who is exactly the children. I was actually thinking that the people who are below the age of 12 or below the age of kind of a 14, because after the 14 those children considered as a kind of a teenagers or things and that, so probably would be less than age of 14. Okay, or I would consider as a kind of children. And will they gonna use kind of such a platform? They will not gonna use, even if I kind of allow them, but they will not gonna use. Why? Because of that it's not a kind of a social platform where you could kind of get entertained or things and that. Let me tell you something regarding about how how the kind of like simply our brain is actually work and things and that. So basically it's this thing till the age of like 20 our brain is not really fully developed. Yeah, like a brain is not fully developed. We are kind of like a still just like a like why not our brain is fully developed? The brain is not fully developed is because of that ki um okay, it's evolution. By the way, if I try to talk about this thing now, I just kind of like somebody just talk about the evolution. Okay, like a basically like a okay, look at me. Okay, so I am standing, I am kind of like a walking, this is my leg. Okay, so basically I am the particular person who walk on two leg. Okay, yeah. So we think like that is a kind of like a advantage, but no, that is not advantage. Like nature is a kind of like a do the trade off. Okay, what's a trade off? Trade off means like that it take one thing, it gives you another thing. Like when it kind of like gives you one thing, it kind of like a take another thing. Now basically is this thing what is actually the stable structure of any kind of like a living organism? A four leg. Okay, a four leg is a kind of like a very stable structure that you could kind of like a simply stable your frontal body and outer body and things like that. And most of the kind of like animals are kind of like a four legs. Okay, most of the animals, but we have kind of like a two legs is because of that ki we are kind of like a started walking and running and things and that. Okay, now basically is this thing na ki when you are kind of like a have four legs means two leg like a two leg, four leg, your body is a kind of like a bit more rigid, and you are kind of like a carrying much more amount of load inside your body. Okay, so when you are kind of like carrying so much amount of load inside your body, then you could kind of like simply make the baby inside of you. Okay, yeah, like make the baby inside of you and kind of like a fully fertilize kind of like a egg to kind of like a something baby will kind of like a created inside you in your womb if you are kind of like a have four legs. Okay, because you have kind of like a stable structure and things and that. But we are not walk on two legs. Okay, we are walk on kind of like sorry, we are not walk on four legs, we are walk on two legs. Now because of we are kind of like a walk on two legs, our kind of like a birth canal is kind of like a very tiny, by the way. Okay, the birth canal means like that where the baby came from, specifically that vagina. Okay, so where it actually came from. And basically is this thing that ki our humans are kind of like something growing, but one of the biggest kind of like something the biggest part of human baby is that our head. Okay, because our head is a kind of like a very much essential thing. So nature decided that ki let's kind of like a make the head a kind of like a something as much as develop as it possible, and that's why it's kind of like a much more bigger head. Like basically this thing when you kind of like a when the baby kind of like a came out from the mother, one of the biggest body part is their head. Okay, but there is also limit to a kind of like a something a 3-inch kind of like a head would be fine. It could kind of like a came from birth canal, but if the kind of like a baby head is kind of like a more than 3-inch or maybe 3 point something inch, then it's very difficult for the woman to kind of like a somebody give the birth because the head is kind of like a too much. Okay, so that's kind of like a very much kind of like a thing. Okay, so nature decided that key trade-off. Okay, what's a trade-off? A trade-off means like that ki make the human baby as much as vulnerable as it possible. Okay, and kind of like a somebody is this thing like a vulnerable, like a basically let me tell you one thing, a kind of like a baby cow or baby giraffe or baby elephant, when they born they are ready for the life, they are ready for, they are kind of like a stand on their two legs or two hand within a couple of kind of like a somebody minutes or things and that and just they are fine, they are good with the life. Okay, they don't really require that much amount of extra effort and things and that. They also develop their fur inside in their mother womb. They also develop lot of things. Okay, yeah. But human baby are just cannot. Okay, human baby are kind of like a so vulnerable, just cannot able to be exist without how how cannot able to be exist without kind of like a external help and things and that. So that is a kind of like a trade-off that ki if the kind of like a somebody, if the humans are kind of like a walking on the two legs, then the babies of the humans should supposed to be kind of like a born little bit less complete. Okay, yeah. Like a basically the human baby are actually born, they are not fully developed, they are kind of like a half developed. Okay, so that's why they kind of like do this trade-off. Now because of the humans are kind of like a born as a half developed, it's not half developed by the way, it's a kind of like a thing that ki it's a develop but a little bit kind of like a less. Okay, little bit kind of like a less, so that it would be kind of like a much more better for kind of like a taking good care of that particular human kid and things and that. So because of human baby are kind of like a so vulnerable, so mother should supposed to be take care of that baby for at least like a couple of year and things and that, so that that baby will kind of like survive in itself and things and that. Okay, now why am I say that ki till the age of 20 our human brain is not really fully evolved. uh, our brain is not fully developed till the age of 20 is because of that ki we are smart humans, we are smart species. Okay, what is at least smart species? Okay, so basically is this thing in the animal, like basically we are not just only one we have brain, like they have so many kind of like simply the species they have kind of like a brain too. But the problem is that na ki the other animal they have a brain, they only have a brain. Okay, yeah. But when we kind of like have a brain, we have kind of like a two thinking, emotion and logic. Okay, emotion and logic, those are kind of like a two important thing. Most of the animals they just have kind of like emotion, logic is like a nothing really at all. What's the exactly logic? Logic means like that ki kind of like a somebody utilizing brain for kind of like a better purposes and things and that. And because of the logic we kind of like a develop this world. Okay, but most of the animal they just have kind of like emotion, one factor, that's it. And that emotion factor is kind of like a develop since they kind of like a born, and throughout they grow up that emotion factor kind of like a grow, that's it. Logic is not even exist. Okay, in the animal I'm not really sure about this thing but probably might be. But in humans we have kind of like a develop not only emotion but logic too. Okay, yeah. And logic is a kind of like a make us kind of like a much more smarter and things and that. Now the problem is that ki since we born we are kind of like a very emotionally attached with our family to the people and things and that. Now because of the lifespan of kind of like a human are as compared to very less. Okay, let me tell you one thing, since we are kind of like a something thousands of year ago we are kind of like a hunter gatherer. And because of we are hunter gatherers we are cannot able to be live that much amount of life. Why? Because multiple factor. First of all is that ki even if we kind of like a walk on two leg, we can't walk that faster, we can't run that much faster. We cannot survive in winter because we do not have fur. We cannot fly, we cannot smell that much good. Our kind of like a somebody the disadvantage is this particular body. We are completely kind of like a somebody just a wafer for another kind of like a something the animal and things like that. Like humans or homo sapien are kind of like a very vulnerable regarding about saving their life and things and that. So because of we are kind of like a so vulnerable for saving the life, saving our life. So why does kind of like so many machar? It's not really machar, it's okay. So because of kind of like a we are kind of like a try to survive. Okay, but obviously we can't survive because we don't really have anything to kind of like add on something, nothing really at all. because of we don't really have anything, the most survival kind of like a something chances are kind of like a getting one homo sapien and another homo sapien together, and kind of like a started living together. Specifically, not homo sapien, homo habilis. Homo sapien are kind of like a bit more evolved. Like a homo sapien is already understand the kind of like a living in group and things and that. Homo habilis is not. A homo habilis is a kind of like a just a very pathetic thing. Okay, yeah. Homo habilis is a kind of like a previous thing. So what exactly happened that we are kind of like a cannot able to be live, so we are kind of like started living together. Okay, now since we are kind of like started living together, we need a coordination, we need a kind of like a some strategy to how do we supposed to live, how do we supposed to be hunt, how do we supposed to do things and that logic started creating inside her head. Because our the biggest kind of like a something the add-on or biggest kind of like a advantage that we have is that we could kind of like a think logically, and from that logic point of perspective we could kind of like a develop. But that logic is kind of like a implement through multiples of people come together. Okay, like how do we supposed to be hunt and things and that. And since then kind of like a logic is a kind of like a started developing. Logic plus emotion. Emotion is a kind of like always been attached since we born, a emotion with your mother or kind of like a things or relation and that. Logic came after. Now because of the logic came after, it kind of like a choose a specific amount of age. Okay, and what is actually that specific amount of age? Age 20. um if you not really understand this thing na, then I'm gonna tell you uh why does puberty actually happen when you are teenager. Why does we kind of like attracted towards another gender too much. Why we are kind of like a so sexually drive so much at the age of kind of like a 16 17. Why? Okay, this is all actually happen is because of that key. We are much more emotional, and basically existing nature wants you to kind of like reproduce, because your life is kind of like a not so good. Okay, yeah. So that's why nature decided that let him kind of like have that thing as quickly as possible, let him kind of like go through emotions that much. So that's why just kind of like a simply we are have that kind of like a feels. That's why we kind of like didn't really think that much logically. We think logically, it's not really that we don't really think logically, but the problem is that the gravity of that logic we don't really understand. Example, we might gonna understand the kind of like a Newton three laws, or maybe kind of like a derivatives or integration, or maybe kind of like we could kind of like a really good score in exam and things and that. But we don't really value of what exactly that knowledge will kind of like add in your life or in society's life and things and that. Okay, yeah. There are so many kids at the before the age of 20, they are kind of like so smart, but the problem is that they don't know what they should supposed to be with the knowledge in their head. Okay, because they are kind of like only just kind of like getting that knowledge is because of their education system are kind of like letting them to learn. So that's why we just kind of like letting learn and things and that. After you kind of like a 25, after you cross 25 or 30, then you kind of like understand that okay, this is the life, this is the kind of like a things. Like why am I kind of like reading this book? Okay, yeah. The Principia of Mathematica from Isaac Newton. Okay, like basically is this thing Isaac Newton laws are kind of like told me when I was in the school and things and that. But still, why am I kind of like reading such a book? Is it because of kind of like a hobby? No, I just wanted to know. Okay, yeah. So that's why the kind of like a prime age, like a prime age means what? Like a prime age means like your brain is fully evolved and you are kind of like a taking action. Okay, according to the kind of like a things, and that prime age actually came after the age of 30. After the age of 30, you are kind of like a thinking broadly regarding about life choices, actions and things and that. And that's why most of the kind of like a people who are kind of like a somebody basically this thing, it's not really that he achieve like a success, and success means having more money. Usually kind of like a people kind of like define as a success means money, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about kind of like somebody A success means kind of like some intellectual, kind of like understandable and things and that and that. And this is kind of like some things that you achieve after you cross 30. Okay, after you cross 30, you are kind of like seeing the world very differently and things and that and that. So that is what it is. Okay. So that's why kind of like assembly the childrens or kind of like are not kind of like a fully evolved and things and that and that. If you still not really understanding this thing na, then observe any kind of like a children, what they are kind of like a watching on television. They watch a cartoon, they watch any kind of like a something the pop-up color and things and that and that. Why? Because of that ki obviously their brain is kind of like a somebody try to understand that thing. They are not able to be understand kind of like somebody the complex subject and things and that and that. Even if you try to kind of like telling them complex subject, they just kind of like learn those complex subject. They don't really understand. Learning and understanding is kind of like a two different thing. Learning means like that they just kind of like learn, okay, A, B, C, D, like A for apple, B for ball, C for cat, D for dog. So that is called kind of like somebody just, yeah. But if you don't really understand the context of kind of like what is actually alphabet, what is actually apple, what is actually cat, what is actually dog, why does D for dog, like basically these are kind of like a question. It really required a kind of like intellectual kind of like a thought process, and that thought process are actually came after 20. Okay, so this is what it is. So basically is like try to observe any kind of like a children around you. They are kind of like a very like a very kind of like somebody very hutty. Very hutty means hutty, like what is the word for hutty? Stubborn. Okay, they are really stubborn. They are kind of like somebody watching lot of kind of like somebody funny videos and kind of like somebody the cartoon and things and that and that. They kind of like do lot of kind of like a movement, maybe kind of like they are playing or they are things, they are kind of like yelling, they are kind of like somebody just observe kind of like a kids, okay, and how they kind of like do. They are kind of like saying nonsense and stuff like that. It's not because of that like they are kind of like a learning phase. They are kind of like understanding the logic plus emotion, but most of the time they are kind of like understanding the emotion first, because emotion is a kind of like a drive them, kind of like a secure and kind of like a something that key secure and reproduce and things and that and that. That's why kind of like a puberty actually started at the age of 14 15. At the age of 16 we are kind of like a sexually drive too much. So this is what it is. This is what kind of like a things. Okay, yeah, the logic start kind of like a simply the logic part came after the age of 20 and things and that and that. Now basically because of this particular stuff, my product is a kind of like a something AI that could kind of like a predict the future. What exactly is this thing? That key a small kids will kind of like somebody scroll through Instagram reel or scroll through YouTube shorts and things and that for hours and hours, is because of that key they don't really kind of like a they are not kind of like a searching for content. The kind of like that Instagram is a kind of like a letting them kind of like found that content, and they don't really put that much amount of effort to get anything at all. Just they just get everything all at kind of like on their phone and things and that and then they just kind of like keep scrolling, keep kind of like doing this thing and that is because of that they just, yeah, like they don't want to kind of like somebody like how you ever kind of like somebody a kind of like a 12-year boy kind of like using ChatGPT to kind of like things and that you might gonna find such a kids who are kind of like using ChatGPT, but probably for very less amount of people. Okay, because most of the kids are just not gonna use a kind of like a ChatGPT or kind of like a Gemini or things and that. Definitely not. Okay, yeah. Now what if the kind of like their education system change? Like what if their from the education system we could kind of like let them kind of like know regarding about the new AI and things and that, and then what? Like probably is this thing that ki do not let them. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing that na ki let them kind of like learn through the conventional method of learning. A for apple, B for ball, 2 to the 2 to the 4 and things and that. Let them kind of like learn through conventional method. Using AI really required a kind of like an intellectual thought process, and that thought process came after the age of 20. Okay, yeah. And after that age of 20 they are kind of like somebody much more evolved with every possible scenarios and things and that. So the question is that is my platform is for children. It's not really that I'm banning the children, but no, it's not for the children. Why? Okay, ChatGPT is a kind of like a fine, because in the ChatGPT you cannot utilize ChatGPT for kind of like a wrong purposes and things and that. You cannot kind of like a create such a image that could kind of like a harm to the society or kind of like a things and that and that. But Adam is not. Adam is a kind of like a, basically what is actually essential. It is all depend on kind of like a truth. Okay, what is actually right and what is actually wrong, because right and wrong statement is a kind of like a very like a, you have to define that first. And even if you don't even if you can't define that thing, then it's not. Example is this thing that key nudity or any kind of like some stuff. So basically for the nudity, how do you kind of like define that thing? Like how do you kind of like a things, like there is a someone who kind of like a looking at me, who the fuck is this thing? Oh my god, someone looking at me, do not fuck the looking at me. Okay, it's not looking at me, yeah, that's good. Okay, what I was kind of like saying, I was kind of like saying that her right and wrong statement. Okay, so in the ChatGPT you cannot kind of like generate a kind of like somebody suicidal kind of like a thoughts, or maybe kind of like some naked images. You cannot able to do that thing, because of that ki ChatGPT kind of like a specifically not mentioning you, specifically not kind of like a letting you do that thing. But Adam is not. Okay, yeah, because Adam is kind of like a right and wrong statement defined on the probability, not a kind of like a somebody how many people think it is right and things and that. Let me tell you one thing. Example is this thing that someone kind of like put the prompt that how do I supposed to be make my condom as much as better and things and that. Now basically condom is a kind of like a sexual product. Okay, yeah, and obviously there are a bunch of information actually available on the internet regarding about the condom. Adam sucked that information from that thing and try to do the simulation. How do he supposed to be do the simulation when he knew that sex is not wrong, sex is a kind of like a part of the society, and let it kind of like do the simulation and things and that. Adam really required to know all the possible consequences regarding about sexual things and that how that thing actually happened, and then after that it could kind of like provide the kind of like as much as kind of like a better product regarding about how do you supposed to make your condom as much as better and things and that, right? Which is a really good thing. But kind of like these kind of like somebody that for the kids they are not really understanding and things and that. For the Adam point of perspective, if I'm kind of like somebody restrict Adam regarding about that kind of like somebody sexual things and that, then it will not gonna develop that much, because Adam kind of like depends on probability architecture, not a kind of like a right and wrong architecture. And probability architecture is always been kind of like a truth regarding about everything. Okay, yeah. So that means that Adam will kind of like generate a kind of like a naked images. Well, first of all, Adam does not create any kind of like images, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. Adam runs a simulation program, and for that simulation program, it really required all kind of like information, even the worst information too, because from that worst information, Adam understand, create the probability, and from that probability, it kind of gives you proper information. Okay, so that's why Adam is not a kind of like a for like a kids. No, definitely not. Okay, yeah. Maybe ChatGPT, maybe Anthropic, maybe Gemini, but not a Adam. Adam really required a kind of like a something, yeah, kind of like a specific kind of like a thoughts and things and that. And also Adam is just use a kind of like an interface, like a basically just a kind of like a blank interface, kind of like a somebody Google homepage, just like that. Okay, nothing really at all. So that's it. Okay, so it's not really that key. I'm kind of like a somebody, I'm abandoned, like basically I'm stopping kids to kind of utilizing my platform, but it's not really meant for them, and basically they are not kind of like evolved that much to kind of like utilize Adam. And also is this thing that I also have technical problem too, because every Adam prompt kind of like goes through simulation program, and that simulation program takes kind of like hours of computational power. If the kid, kind of like a normal kid, kind of like say I want strawberry cake, then probably is this thing that Adam will kind of like simulate hundreds and millions of consequences to kind of like make that strawberry cake, or kind of like make that kind of like giving you recipe that how should you supposed to make the strawberry cake. But in the end that kid will kind of like refuse, and he didn't really make that cake. It just, yeah, because in the end he will kind of like follow the prompt or not. Okay, so that is a lot of things. Adam is a kind of like a for the serious businesses. Adam is a kind of like a for the government institution. Adam is a kind of like a for the policy maker. Adam is kind of like a made for institutional. Adam is actually made for kind of like a simply whole community of the people. How much it add value, not if individual personal. So yeah. And basically is this thing that key Adam is just kind of like a backend structure, like a basically the most of the kind of like a value is not kind of like a came from the homepage and things. It actually came from API. I already mentioned regarding about API, but right now talking about this thing doesn't really make sense at all. So the question is that should children will use my platform or not? No, they are not allowed to use my platform. Okay, at least I need them, at least like a age verification will gonna happen, and after the age verification they will kind of like a use my platform. Yeah. All right, this is it. I have to be end here. Thank you.